I'm Chris Bedford at the Federalist, and welcome back to another Federalist Radio Hour. I'm joined here by Alex Plitsas, who has been someone who's been speaking out and doing a lot for an organization called Operation Dunkirk. Operation Dunkirk is one of the efforts that's being led with a mixture of public and private people, retired people, civilians, anyone who basically has an understanding of and an interest in getting American persons and people who are at risk from Taliban execution out of Afghanistan and back to safety in the middle of this whole retreat. Alex, who I've known for a long time, has a vested interest himself. He was a volunteer as a young man down at the World Trade Center during the cleanup, trying to be being one of the first responders, one of the people who was there in the wreckage, growing up in the New York and now living in Connecticut, New Jersey, that whole tri-state area. After that, he joined the U.S. Army. He went to Iraq with the United States Army. He's been to Afghanistan with the Department of Defense as an intelligence officer, a civilian. He's been, since then, worked in the Pentagon, or maybe a little bit before that, worked in the Pentagon in intelligence. The now retired, now a happily married man, father of two beautiful girls, but suddenly pulled back into this whole thing and this whole retreat. Alex, it's been a wild ride.
It's been a wild couple of weeks, I'll tell you that. Yeah, that's probably the most accurate description.
What brought you back in, and tell us about the operations that you've been conducting, and what it's like on the ground. I mean, some people know that there are folks who are stuck over there. No one seems to have an understanding of how many people or what's going on.
Sure.
Give us a day-to-day and what it was like first before the full U.S. retreat and then after.
So the U.S. withdrawal plan was kind of announced publicly. President Trump made the decision to withdraw, and then President Biden said he was going to follow through on that, and then President Biden ordered a policy review, asked for options for withdrawal plans, and then consulted with his team, with the senior military leaders, and he determined that he was going to do it the way that he wanted to, and that was going to have everybody out by a specific date. We were down to about 625 troops in country at one point, and the country rapidly collapsed in a matter of about 2 weeks. And during that short time, kind of chaos sort of ensued inside the country. And so the president made a decision. We were going to be out by 8:31, and then a bunch of national security professionals basically got together, and we formed a group called Digital Dunkirk. And from there, we've been working both up until the withdrawal in support of the official U.S. evacuation operation until 8:31, and then afterwards, we are still working now to help folks that are there.
And you've saved a lot of people. I got in contact with you because a friend of mine's translator from his special operator. His first translator when he was in Afghanistan is an American citizen now. He's since come to the United States. He's since joined the United States Army. His wife from Afghanistan is a green card holder, not a full-blown American citizen yet. Thinking that, and this is the kind of the mindset, because at first I was wondering who was going to Kabul at the end. Well, there's a lot of people who didn't expect this to happen nearly as rapidly as it did. They took the U.S. intelligence word for it, and they have mothers, and they have brothers, and they have family, and they have friends. They have a whole life that they realized, well, they're never going to see them again. So they went back for one last visit, and then boom, overnight, everything was gone. The Taliban are outside. And suddenly, this woman who had no intention of living in Afghanistan again, she was simply saying goodbye to her sick mother, is stuck there with her brother, an Afghan army officer. You were working to try and find these people, and you did.
Yep.
So walk me through what you're allowed to say.
Sure.
What that process was like, because I was blown away by it.
So there was only one way in and out of the country at that point. It was through the airport in Kabul. It was a strategic choke point. Decision was made for armed forces not to leave the airport vicinity, so they weren't going out in the city and grabbing people. They weren't going out to other areas of the country to get people. It was basically, you have to get to Kabul, have to get to the airport, and the State Department put out very specific instructions.
The TSA, where it's Taliban security agency, will let you through their lines if they like.
Pretty much. They were setting policy for who got in and out. So when you got to the airport, right, so the State Department would tell folks, hey, you need to be at this place at this time with appropriate paperwork or whatever it was for the folks that had registered with the State Department, which they should have done when they went to Afghanistan. So that was the other thing we were imploring people to do. If you still have folks that are there, please ensure that they're registered with the State Department.
A lot of people do not register with the State Department,
Yeah.
So the State Department, it does not know that they're there.
No, and from overseeing hostage policy as part of my hostage rescue portfolio when I was at the Pentagon, on the paperwork side at least, it wasn't actioning, just policy oversight. I can tell you it's impossible to find people if we don't know where they are. You can't be rescued if no one knows that you exist or that you're somewhere. So that's why they need to register. So State Department was reaching out to people who officially notified them that they were present. And from there, a couple things happened. Very naturally, dealing with a giant bureaucracy, they had paperwork that had to get filled out. Spreadsheets, forms, whatever it was the State Department was asking for information for these folks, right? In some cases,
it's going to be the general kind of travel stuff. Where you're going to be, what address you're staying at, what's the point of your visit, kind of stuff.
Who are you? What's your status? What do you, are you green card holder, visa? Are you a citizen? And then from there, based on the disposition of things on the ground and who the Taliban were letting through, they would say, okay, hey, you people, this gate, this time, this is where you need to be. And so for some folks, they need help with the paperwork. In some cases, they needed help physically navigating through the city to get to where they needed to go. They needed help with security checkpoints. They needed potentially documentation, getting in touch with folks in the States. And in some cases, they needed some sensitive logistics to get them around and keep them safe. And so the case you're talking about right now is one of those. So basically, we were able to, after you pass the information, find out where she was located, along with a number of other American families that I received. The other ones I received from Jake Tapper at CNN. So it's funny, both journalists coming in here and in a bipartisan effort, kind of
the Federalists and CNN get together with Alex Plitsas.
Yeah, it's been a strange couple of weeks, and so we were able to locate them, get a coordinate for where they were, arrange for safe transportation to safe locations, and then from there, work to get them manifested on planes through the U.S. government. All official efforts. Nobody was trying to play James Bond, and then from there. We had to work to get them to the airport itself and then finally through the gate. So it took 72 to 96 hours to get all this done. But upon notification, we had most folks in a safe location within a matter of hours.
And then you had the difficulty of knowing that all the Americans are going to one place. It's going to be a target, which sadly it turned out to be. A target, and a lot of people lost their lives over that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, so a cousin of the woman you're speaking of, a cousin of her husband, showed up at the airport at the same time. We had caught wind of the terrorist threat to the airport. We knew that there was a potential suicide bombing that was going to happen, and we rightfully guessed that the location they would attack is where the State Department told all the Americans to go for a couple of days in different times. And if you were going to attack, that's if you wanted to attack Americans, that's where you would go.
Because they wanted America to get re-involved in the war.
Yes, I mean the Islamic State's affiliate in Afghanistan is the Khorasan group, and so they and the Taliban, believe it or not, don't get along. They've been fighting, and it's like the one common point we have.
ISIS doesn't seem to get along with anyone.
No, nobody's extreme enough for them. They literally say that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda are not extreme enough for them. They think that they're too soft, which I know sounds insane, but it's legit. So suicide bombers come and they blow up at the airport. Fortunately, we knew that they were, in general, there was a threat, and if it was going to happen, that's where it would be. We didn't know that there was, actually the specific attack was going to happen. And so we had our folks in a different area from the airport to make sure that they were safe. But unfortunately, the male cousin of the husband of the woman that you were just referencing I actually have the picture that he sent, which was forwarded on to me, was the photo showing how packed the gate area was, and it was seconds before the explosion rocked.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, it was terrible, and he didn't make it, but fortunately, the guy's wife did, because we were able to keep her safe on the other side of the airport and get her on a plane.
This has got to be a surreal experience going through this, having been in Afghanistan, having served in both theaters of the war on terror, having been in the Mind Nexus, the Pentagon, where it all kind of comes together, all these ideas come together, in the White House during the Obama years, and now in your fourth president since the attacks, coming up on the 20-year anniversary of when you were at Ground Zero. I know this is sensitive. Can you walk me through where your head's at and where your friends' heads are at, and does this bring closure? Is this any kind of ending? What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
Well, yeah, somebody who's done that, suffered from post-traumatic stress. I mean, this has been a bit of closure for me. I mean, I spent the least time in Afghanistan compared to Iraq, and I know none of the folks I'm working with are my own personal interpreters. They're just people that needed to get out, or Americans that needed to get out, and it's our responsibility. I mean, I look at these efforts kind of like what happened in World War II, where people were hiding Jews in the attic, or other places where these were civilians who were not in the military, but they had an opportunity to help and provide safe passage and harbor. And if you have the opportunity to do it, you do. There are some vets who I think are having a very difficult time with it. I've been seeing a number of reports coming in from the VA that I think the crisis hotline has spiked significantly. Because you look at all the time and effort that we put in, $83 billion in infrastructure improvements, and then another $1.9 trillion spent on military, hardware, personnel, everything else for the war effort. Years of your life in that country helping to build up a military, a society, and try to get them standing up on their own 2 feet so we can leave. And then we withdraw, and then within 2 weeks, everything collapses. That's a lot. That's a lot for some folks to handle.
Now this Saturday up in Fairfield, Connecticut, you're going to be giving a speech to the town as fire commissioner up there, as a part of the town, Republican committeeman. What what are some of the themes that you're trying to touch on? What are you going when you turn to the people who in Fairfield, Connecticut? This is a town just like all the towns around there that is remembering people that
died. Yeah.
And in that town, in that county, everybody up there in the Northeast knows people.
Sure.
Even up as far as Massachusetts, there are people in our town who were killed, and but in that area, right around New York City, is where you see the most deaths outside of Manhattan. What are you talking to these people about, and what kind of people are still gathering every year to commemorate, to remember, to hear this? You've mentioned that you've given this speech a couple of times, but I imagine this year it'll be different.
It will. Normally the focus is on the first responders who died that day and the people who died. Passed on a story that was told to me, and if it's folklore or not, it doesn't matter, but confirmed enough from enough folks. There was a detainee in a holding cell early on in the war, and basically came out and said, hey, we realized this was not going to be an easy fight when we watched the American firefighters and cops basically go into the building knowing that it was on fire and going to collapse, and that the American resolve was there. It was kind of like one of those awakening a sleeping giant moment from World War II after Pearl Harbor was attacked. Speaking to some of the folks and trying to make sense of kind of where we're at now, the original mission was to degrade and destroy al-Qaeda to the point where they were not able to conduct attacks against the United States. And so the only solace that we can take at this point is the fact it wasn't in the last 20 years used as a launching pad for additional attacks that killed American civilians. So the concern is what happens in the vacuum once we leave, just like when we withdrew from Iraq in 2011, and we'll kind of see that playing out over the next couple months. We'll see how that goes. But the focus will be on, at least for me, those who passed, the incredible bravery of our first responders who still, amaze me to this day. And the fact that, there was honorable service over 20 years for folks. It wasn't just sitting there in nation building. That was obviously a main aspect of what was going on after combat was done. But this was also an opportunity, to make sure al-Qaeda didn't attack our folks again. And I think those who served should kind of keep that in mind, that while they were there, that's what they were doing. They were helping to provide that presence and that security to make sure that our folks weren't attacked, and they should take some comfort in that.
What do you think comes next for the operation that you're working on? This is not something where it's not just trying to get people out of an earthquake zone or a place that's got some kind of COVID breakout. Time is of the essence.
It is.
And what message do you have to anyone, any of those who are in Congress, who are working in government, or those who have the ability, who are just civilians, people who are out there and across America, who are worried about this, who want to get friends, loved ones out of there, who want to make sure that American persons aren't ending up being beheaded on camera, like we saw over and over again with Daniel Pearl and with other brave Americans who went over there and were killed before at the beginning of this war.
Sure.
What can they do? What kind of timeline are we working with? What's the reality of the situation that's on the ground right now? No one's getting truth really from the political spokesman out there, but you have a lot of eyes on the ground.
Sure. There's still a lot of folks that are left between American citizens and green card holders. The number is probably much higher than the 200 citizens that's been quoted. You add the green card holders, who are, these aren't people, most of them are not people who stayed in Afghanistan for 20 years, the green card. Most of them work in the United States and pay taxes. And they're over there for familiar reasons, like you said, visiting sick family, going to a wedding, and they want to come home. And so the number's probably closer to the thousands, folks that are still there. We have an obligation to bring them home. And that's the focus needs to be in the next couple of weeks. I mean, my concern is not so much the Taliban. The rank and file Taliban, yes, if somebody doesn't pay attention and folks look Afghan, so to speak, because they're ethnically Afghan Americans, right? So they look and dress and feel the same as an Afghan. You wouldn't know that they were an American citizen or a green card holder unless you saw the paperwork. So the concern there is if anybody, rank and file Taliban, something happens, they don't follow orders. Because I think the Taliban genuinely want us out. I think they realize if an American gets harmed, this is going to be a problem. Right, because that's going to bring our wrath back.
Do you think that's true?
I think at the leadership level, I do. I think that the underlings probably don't care.
I just wonder if that's true that the American wrath will fall down under this administration. I
think they don't want to find out, to be honest with you, and I don't know if the administration will do it as well. But I mean, if we have Americans that are killed, I think they've realized at this point that political pressure coming from the public is enough to get action taken, and I think they're just done with us. We've been fighting for 20 years, fought to a stalemate. We left, and they're just like, get out, just get the hell out of here, take all your people and go. We don't want you here anymore. So my bigger concern is not the Taliban.
ISIS and groups like that want us there?
Yeah, so the Islamic State Khorasan group proved that they were able to conduct complex suicide attacks less than 2 weeks ago. They hit the airport, they killed 13 of our service members who bore the brunt of all the risks so other Americans could live, and 13 of them laid down their lives for us, right? Which is a big deal. It's the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of the nation. They're all heroes, every last one of them. But they showed that they can do those attacks still. And then a second wave of suicide bombers was intercepted by a missile, and there were civilian casualties. We saw all those news reports play out. So bottom line, if you look at their operational capabilities as a terrorist group, they're still able to acquire the materials and the technical know-how to build advanced explosive devices. They've got volunteers to conduct suicide attacks. Obviously, there's a command and control structure somewhere that's organizing all of this. And that's just ISIS. We still have al-Qaeda that's operating there. We know that the al-Qaeda security chief for bin Laden rolled back in the country, basically waving his hand out the window like it was a victory parade. And so my biggest fear is that those who remain at this point will end up becoming potential targets for either attacks or hostage situations or that kind of thing. So it's really in our best interest to move as quickly as possible to get these people out of there.
How are you funding these operations? Because it's not cheap.
No, it's not cheap. Without getting into too many specifics, it's all being done legally through 501c3s because it's humanitarian efforts of taking care of folks.
Can people support it? Can our listeners support you? How can they help get money to your efforts, so it's not just all you guys and women pouring your personal savings into this?
Yeah, and that's really what it's been at this point. So I'll be able to put something out on Twitter with some information that folks that I can give or pass to you to be able to put out. And if you follow Chris on Twitter, it's
C Bedford DC. And Alex, you've been extremely active on Twitter. I've seen it in multiple sources. Where can people find your work?
Sure, it's at Alex, Alex, Plitsas, Plitsas. So that's my Twitter handle, and we'll be putting out some information for how to help. Because Chris is right, it's been an expensive endeavor. I mean, so far the group I'm working with, we're $5.5 million in. Everybody dumped their 401ks basically to keep this thing funding and make sure we could provide the support necessary to help folks. And some of the money is starting to trickle back in, but the goal is to repay it and then continue to provide support until those folks are able to be evacuated.
Yeah, this is very different from the average Washington D.C. nonprofit. This is not a money making venture.
No,
this is people. You've been staying with me the last couple of days, where you've been down here meeting with some people, and it's wild to see between local Connecticut politics and your obligations and that, a full-time job, a family, 2 children, and this. I can't. You've switched. I remember earlier today, you switched between 3 different phone calls from hang up, all right, got to go, click, next phone call. It's been a lot of work, so thank you for doing that, and thank you for so honorably serving this country for so long.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, we have warrior ethos in the Army, and it's it's part of the oath when you take and you say it. It's I will never accept defeat. I will never quit, and I'll never leave a fallen comrade. We don't leave anybody behind. That's been the U.S. mantra forever, and we can't hold that line as a value for the United States if we don't do that. And there's Americans left behind, and we owe it to them to get them out.
And well, this effort, Alex, has given you a lot of public credit and a lot of raised your status, because you're one of the few people, it seems like, who's really able to come out and talk in these operational
that's really
things.
what it is.
You're completely retired. You're not involved with this.
Yep.
I sure hope that you will continue to write for The Federalist as you have in the past.
Absolutely, Chris. And he actually brings up a good point. So there's a solid team that's in place that's really been doing a lot of the work. I am public facing because I'm out, and it makes it a little easier, and having a verified Twitter account and media access is helpful, but there's a team, particularly Core 4 there, so between Joy and Safi and Rob kind of running operations, and me included in the group with them, they've really done incredible work, and the ability to scale and do things has just been nothing short of miraculous. I mean, I've been an executive at some Fortune 500 companies as well as in the U.S. government. I have never seen an operation like this scaled this quickly to provide this level of support from afar in my entire professional career.
Oh, God bless you guys. Thank you for joining us, Alex.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This is Alex Plitsas with Operation Dunkirk, and I'm Chris Bedford, senior editor at The Federalist. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Federalist Radio Hour. Until next time, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray.